Welcome back to No One Told Us, the podcast that tells the truth about parenting and talks about all the stuff you wish you knew before having kids. I am thrilled today to welcome Dr. Darby Saxbe. Darby is a clinical psychologist and professor of psychology at the University of Southern California, and she is the author of Dad Brain, the new science of fatherhood and how it shapes men's lives, which was just released. We have a copy in our house. My husband has been working his way through it and loving it. So I'm so excited to welcome you to the podcast. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us all about fathers and fatherhood and dad brains.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first, I just want to hear a little bit about why you decided to tackle this topic of fathers and the dad brain, because we hear so much about mom brain, which is, so important also. And it's not as talked about that, dads have these changes in their brains as well. And I'm just curious, why you thought that this was such an important topic to bring to light.
Yeah, so I've always been fascinated by families and parenting and just the challenges of parenting. And I have noticed that so much parenting content is directed exclusively at moms. And as you said, some of the emerging science that has been translated to the public is about the mothering brain and the hormones of motherhood. And yet there is this really exciting body of research that is just coming out about male parenting experiences. And I talk about this in the book, but as a kid, after my parents got divorced, my dad became the primary parent to me and my brothers and sister. And so I had the experience of watching a father really transform himself in real time and step up to the parenting role. And so I've always seen fathers as really key parents. And I'm lucky to be married to a husband who's very involved with our kids. And so it just felt like there was this missing piece in the research that people would be curious to hear about and hence would be a good topic for a book.
Yeah, totally. And I think too, I'm wondering when you were writing the book, if you found it frustrating or difficult because there is such little research about it. I mean, I get asked all the time on my page how certain things I talk about apply to not only men, but non-birthing partners. There's lots of same-sex couples who follow me and who wonder about how things apply to them if they're not the ones that gave birth. So what did you find in the research about that? Or was it hard because there's such a lack?
I really tried to be honest in the book about the limitations of what we know because I wanted to resist the temptation to say, science says this, when in fact we have a handful of studies and we're often making our best guesses. So I tried to be as clear as I could about the limitations. But a lot of the work that's out there is work that I've actually done in my own lab. So I have the advantage of having done some of the research that I'm trying to explain to folks, which helps me understand both its contributions and its limitations. And we've looked at how men's hormones are linked with their parenting experiences, how they change across the transition to parenthood. We've looked at men's brain structure and how that changes when men become fathers. We've looked at brain function, how men respond to infant stimuli, and then also just at parenting behavior. So how fathers bond, how they communicate with their partners, how they attach to their infants. So I think there's a lot to say. What we have, though, reflects the work of just a handful of labs. So it's this kind of cutting edge area of research where I think we could use more and better and bigger studies.
Yeah, for sure. And we also do have, though, anthropological research and things like that to draw from as well. So it's not like you only have to have a few studies to draw conclusions from, right? You can use all different types of sources, which I know you do. I'm curious what you found. I mean, you do this research, and I'm curious if anything that you found or put in the book was something that was surprising to you or was something you weren't expecting to find.
Definitely. Yeah, the fact that men lose gray matter volume across the transition to fatherhood. So that's something that's been seen in moms. And I always say this, it sounds like a bad thing when your brain is shrinking. It seems to actually be adaptive because it's linked with better bonding and attunement with the child. And it may be a process by which the brain is streamlining to work faster and more efficiently. So we lose a little gray matter volume and the brain pathways get refined. It's kind of like a
Mm.
specialization of the brain. So I was surprised to see that the patterns in dads are so similar to the patterns in moms, because we often talk about the experience of motherhood and the experience of fatherhood as being totally distinct from each other.
Mhm.
And they are in a lot of important ways. But I would say one of the key insights that I talk about in the book is that there's not so much a maternal brain and a paternal brain. There's really a parental brain. And it gets expressed differently in dads. It's more tied to their experience with child rearing, but it can absolutely still develop. And we see a lot of the same pathways getting implicated in the brain change that we find.
Mm. Yeah, so it's like the maternal instinct thing is maybe more socialized than based in science. Is that kind of what you're trying to say?
Well, or a parental instinct.
Right.
But I kind of say this in the book, like great parents are made, not born. Like we often talk about moms being wired to care just innately. The baby's born, she knows exactly what to do. I don't know if that was your experience. That wasn't
No.
really my experience, you know?
Nope, not at
My
all.
baby was born and I was like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do?
Yes.
So like you do have a strong bond and you have a sense of connection, but you're figuring a lot of stuff out on the fly.
Yeah.
And so I think we can kind of make it seem like there's something so unique about that learning process that only moms are able to do it. And that's not really what I found. I found it's more about practice,
Mm.
experience, and learning. And it's about motivation. So when dads are primary parents, when they're key parents, when they put in the work to get to know their baby, they can create a bond. They can have that secure attachment. And then their neurobiology follows suit and it adapts to the parenting experience that they're getting. So rather than thinking we have this built-in instinct or this built-in brain that shows us what to do, it's more like as we practice and learn, we build that brain that makes us more sensitive caregivers. And
Right.
that brain comes online in a way that isn't only for men or only for women.
Right. That totally makes sense. And I think so many men are robbed or maybe rob themselves of the opportunity to like learn on the job as you're describing. And I mean, it's one reason I talk so much about the importance of parental leave because you see in other countries that have these great policies, not just for maternity leave, but for paternity leave, where they actually kind of force the men to take the leave or else they'll lose it. It's like a use it or lose it type of policy. And you see such amazing outcomes, not
Yeah,
just in the parent-child bond, but in the mental health of the mother and in their relationship. Like there are just so many benefits. And I think a lot of men just assume, oh no, you're just better at it. Or, oh no, you're wired to do this. Like I'll go out and make the money and you do this at home with the baby. And it's really just not helping anybody to think that way.
exactly. You said that perfectly. I have a whole chapter in the book about these paternity leave incentive or nudge programs where it's
Hmm.
like a certain chunk of the leave is earmarked just for dad. And if he doesn't take it, it goes away. And so what that does is it destigmatizes paternity leave taking because both members of the couple are really motivated to preserve that time.
Hmm.
And it means that there aren't the same consequences for employers because I think what we see a lot in the US is even when men have paternity leave available to them through their jobs, they're reluctant to take it. They
Hmm.
feel like they won't look like good workers. Their boss, their coworkers will resent them. And when you really build a system that kind of compels men to take leave, it kind of takes that fear away because everybody is taking it and it's universally recognized as a good idea. And you see dads really engaging in parenting and reporting that they enjoy it and that they benefit from the bond
Hmm.
with their kids. So I do think in a lot of ways in contemporary society, we set dads up to fail. We kind of give them this idea that they're not going to be good with kids. And because we also aren't growing up in a hunter-gatherer setting where we have lots of interactions with lots of people's kids, neither moms nor dads are getting a lot of early parenting experience to
Right.
give that familiarity and comfort level with how this is how you swaddle a baby. This is how you comfort a baby. So you hand a man a baby and he's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I might as
Right.
well just go to work. At least I know I'm good at that.
Right.
And it really is about when you put in the time, you learn what to do. And we need to, I think, set the right conditions for both men and women to have that opportunity for time to bond.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think so many of us, men and women, like you said, we don't live in these big family groups anymore. I think when you have a baby, sometimes that's your very first time holding a baby, which is
Yeah.
like so crazy. And yeah, I'm curious if you have any advice for dads who are feeling like really scared or just totally inadequate and feel like they're going to fail or mess up or hurt the baby or do something wrong. What would you tell them about kind of just like not getting over it, but kind of using that and knowing that it gets better and easier with time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very understandable thing to worry. You have this little creature that's so vulnerable that caregiving for it is such a new challenge. I mean, in some ways, I think we can prevent this situation from happening by making sure that our teenage boys are getting opportunities to babysit and making sure
Mm,
that we're spending time with friends and families, babies and children, so that we are building up that comfort level for men as well as for women. But I would say, like, get in there, right? Nobody knows your baby better than you do. You have the opportunity to become the world's number one expert in your own kid, and every
mm,
baby is a little bit different. So there's no universal script that some people just know. A lot of it is trial and error and learning how to respond. You know, when I do this, the baby does that.
mhm.
Here's how I can calm this particular baby down. And so familiarity really does grow that bond. It's not like you have the bond and then you put in the practice. It's like the
Right.
time and the practice is what makes that bond come online. And I think there's a lot of value to offering prenatal skills classes for parents, programs that involve both moms and dads. I think moms get a lot of opportunities. Like I did a breastfeeding support group as a new mom. I did mommy and me yoga. I did mommy
Mhm.
and me music class. Like I had a lot of chances to be around other moms and babies and compare notes and get advice.
We recently remodeled our bathroom. It was our only bathroom for our big family of 5, and it was a complete disaster. It was so old, everything was broken. It really needed a total refresh. And the designer that I worked with recommended so many of our products sourced right from Wayfair. The tile that I shared that everybody went crazy for is incredible. It's so beautiful and unique, and it's from Wayfair. Just like a lot of our fixtures, our medicine cabinet, so many of the perfect pieces came together for our dream bathroom, and it was all thanks to Wayfair. Our designer knew that we wanted something beautiful and timeless with great taste, but we really didn't have a budget to be getting super high-end finishes. With using Wayfair, we didn't have to compromise what we wanted. We got the exact look we were going for. It looks so beautiful and chic, and we were able to stay within our budget. The delivery process was also completely seamless, so everything went according to plan, and we just couldn't be happier with the final result. Wayfair has over 20 million 5-star reviews, so you're not buying blind. You can see real customers, real photos and homes, and get real feedback before you add anything to your cart. If putting it all together by yourself sounds like a headache, they can handle not only the delivery, but also the installation and assembly. So you can just pick what you want and Wayfair will deal with the rest. This makes it such a perfect and seamless process for busy families. So if you are ready to upgrade your home for way less, head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home and get your space ready for less. That's WAYFAIR.com.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
When hunger strikes and I'm absolutely exhausted, or we're coming home from a trip or activities or camp or all the other fun things we want to do this summer, the last thing I want to do is stare at my empty fridge and try to figure out what we're going to cook for dinner. That's why I absolutely love Factor, because Factor has meals built around your goals, whether that's overall nutrition, more protein, or strength and workout recovery. And each meal is crafted with functional ingredients like lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole foods, and healthy fats. The best part is that they are fresh and never frozen, and there's over 100 rotating weekly meals, including globally inspired flavors like Mediterranean and Asian, so I absolutely never get bored. I always have something new and tasty to look forward to, and the quality is incredible. It tastes like you're eating a high-quality restaurant meal. You can also try the newly launched ready-to-eat salads, which I love for the summertime when it's too hot to eat warm food. And you can also add 70 plus add-ons to round out your nutrition. So from green juices to peanut butter energy bites, and everything's ready so quickly in just 2 minutes. Factor does all the shopping, prepping, and cooking, delivering straight to your door so you have more time for everything else that you want to do this summer. So head to factormeals.com/no-one-told-us-50 off and use code no-one-told-us-50 off to get 50% off and free daily greens per box with new subscriptions only while supplies last until 9/27/2026. See the website for more details.
And I do think we can try harder as a society to create the opportunities for dads to get feedback from other dads and from folks who have some expertise.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also thinking, I think there's this misconception that a lot of dads have that we're not only better at it, but we just instinctively know more, or the baby prefers us. And that's kind of like oh, the baby just wants you, the baby just needs you. And you're so much better at calming the baby down, or you're so much better at doing their bedtime or whatever it is. And it's like, well, no, I've also been struggling and fighting for my life, but I have no choice. I have no one to hand the baby to. I have to just figure it out. And I think a lot of dads and a lot of men are just never put in that situation of the sink or swim. And so they just never develop that skill.
Totally. So often mom is the default parent. And so she's the fallback. No matter what happens, she's going to have to figure it out. And I mean, I'm sure you, like I, as a new mom, spent hours with a screaming infant having absolutely no idea what to do. We've all been through that.
Yep.
And that's, that's the trial by fire. And then you start to build some confidence after you survive that.
Right.
But I think, for one of my pieces of advice for moms is you might need to leave the house, or put him in charge of an outing. Don't try to micromanage. Don't try to tell him what needs to happen. Give him his own opportunity to come up with his own style. But I do hard. I have a lot of sympathy for new dads. I think in the first few months, a lot of them do feel somewhat helpless, they're not quite sure what their role should be. And I think when moms are breastfeeding, there's this very obvious thing that they can do that the baby needs that's going to be soothing and comforting to the baby. And dads don't have that kind of superpower.
Right.
So they really do have to play catch up and be creative to figure out how can they step in and still form that parenting bond.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was my experience because I exclusively breastfed my kids. My first, less so, because I had to go back to work pretty early with him. But my husband did take over and did bottles and figured it out. But I think too, a lot of us are kind of guilty of this maternal gatekeeping trap where we don't want to see either of them struggle. We don't want to see our baby upset, and we don't want to see our husbands struggle. And so we just step in and say, "Oh, never mind, I'll just do it." What do you think? What do you think is the downside of doing that?
Yeah, I wrote about this a little bit in the book that I think this is a very understandable dynamic for both partners. Dad wants help, mom wants to provide guidance, but it can spiral over time into a pattern where men just feel shut out from childcare and they start to doubt that they have the skills. And so I think anytime mom is feeling the impulse to she likes it better when you hold her this way, or here's the way to get our toddler to brush his teeth, try to be aware of that pattern and keep an open line of communication that I might not be the expert. I've just learned a few things through trial and error, and the baby might respond to different kinds of behaviors from you. Because that's the other thing too, is that moms and dads play and interact in slightly different ways. They touch their babies differently. They hold their babies differently. So what a baby really responds to from mom might not actually click perfectly for dad. Dad may need to have his own strategies. And so again, I think it's very challenging, and couples need to anticipate that this might happen. And this is where I think prenatal counseling can be really helpful.
For sure. Yeah.
But it's something for both mom and dad to spot. I think when that gatekeeping pattern is starting to make men feel like they aren't sure where to start as parents.
Yeah. What do you think about that kind of trope about dads being better at the rough and tumble wrestling type of play and being more fun, and then moms having to be a little bit more of the firm one, or the one that they go to for comfort? Is there anything in mom brains or dad brains that says that those things are universally true?
So there's definitely some observational evidence that dads tend to play in more physically stimulating ways. So when you think about throwing baby up in the air, playing catch, tickling, dads tend to gravitate towards those styles of interaction. There's some evidence that that's really healthy for kids. They really crave that kind of play, and it helps them develop confidence
Mm-hmm.
and test their resilience. But I actually talked to an anthropologist who I interviewed for the book who studied hunter-gatherer fathers, and he looked at a society where the hunter-gatherer dads are really involved in early baby care. And he said in that society, he actually didn't see a lot of bouts of father-child play because the dads are the everyday parent. They're not just a fun parent. So it's one of those things where I think there's both a biological piece, like you see very physical play in male child pairs, even in primates, not just in humans. But there's also a cultural piece. There's a socialization piece. I think if you've seen other men in your circle or your own dad play in this really vigorous, active way, then you see that as the style that you should emulate as a dad. So I think socialization plays a big role, like with all of our parenting behaviors, right? There's this mix of biology and culture and socialization that come together to shape us as parents.
Totally. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk to you about something that went viral kind of in a bad way. And we'll be right back. Okay, Darby, I have a question because I saw you weigh in on this conversation and I loved what you said because I completely agreed with you. I forget what publication it was that came out with it, but it was a piece on postpartum depression and a lot of people, including so-called feminists, wrote in the comments that we shouldn't be caring this much about dads because we don't care about moms, and what about moms, and we shouldn't be calling it postpartum depression, and just really downplaying it. And I kind of loved your response. So I'm wondering if you could share kind of your thoughts on mental health for dads in the postpartum period.
I have a whole chapter on mental health in men and new dads in the book. And so I have thought a lot about this. I talked to a couple of therapists who specialize in working with dads who have perinatal depression and anxiety. And I have been surprised by the pushback that women who are motherhood advocates, and as you said, frequently identify as feminists, they have been so angry and frustrated to hear dads included in the postpartum depression conversation. And on the one hand, I totally understand what they're saying. Like, women's mental health, the mental health of new moms has been totally neglected, and we have not devoted enough resources to understanding and treating perinatal mood disorders in new moms. And I totally get that there's something really unique about giving birth, breastfeeding. Those are challenges that are really specific for new moms. At the same time, I don't think we want to gatekeep mental health in new parents. If we want a society where men are contributing as full parents, if they're really stepping up and playing a key role in those early months, they're going to struggle with a lot of the same challenges that new moms struggle with. They're also going to feel isolated and drained and exhausted. They're also going to be sleep deprived. They're also going to question their professional identity. They're also going to see relationship changes. Those are just some of the predictors of depressive symptoms in new moms, and many of those are shared by dads. Even hormones. Hormones can change in new dads as well as in new moms. So there is a biochemical component as well for both fathers and mothers. And I think what's important is to remember that this is not an either or, it's a both and. We want to think about, how do we build the best team to support a new baby? We don't want to think about pitting moms versus dads as though it's a zero-sum game. We know that in maternal mental health, the best predictor of mom's well-being is the support that she gets from her partner. And so when dad is struggling and incapacitated, that directly affects mom's well-being.
Exactly.
Mother and father depressive symptoms are correlated in the first year postpartum. So the idea that we somehow shouldn't treat dads or diagnose dads because that's going to take something away from moms, to me, is completely backwards. The reason to support dads in many cases is because that's also going to support moms. And I even talked to a psychologist for the book who one of his big interventions is to actually train fathers as support providers to moms who are at risk of depression. And in so doing that, he's kind of covertly treating the dads as well by
Genius.
educating them about mental health and giving them suggestions about what to do. He's kind of treating the whole family system because mental health is really a family systems event and it's not just about individuals.
Exactly. Oh, that's so smart. I love that. What are some of the kind of behavioral warning signs for moms or dads listening to kind of look out for where we might say, oh, a dad might be struggling with this?
So a lot of these are shared across both moms and dads, but there are some really distinct ways in which depression and anxiety can show up specifically in new dads. So we know that depression in general tends to get underdiagnosed in men, and it might not look like tears. It might not look like sadness. It might look more like irritability. And dads being withdrawn, not wanting to hold the baby, not wanting to be involved in the day-to-day of parenthood, which of course is no fun for mom because we just talked about how often she feels like the fallback parent. So if dad is avoiding the baby, if he is throwing himself into work, sometimes you see a lot of breadwinner pressure and anxiety in new dads where they're really concerned about making sure they can support the family. And so they might be working extra long hours. And again, not great.
Nightmare. No.
Not
I used to track my
helpful.
husband's location, and if he wasn't leaving the office at 5 p.m., I would throw a fit because it was like, get home.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's like the mom is really needing something from the dad that he's not quite able to provide. And in part that might be because of his own untreated mental health. And I actually wonder, there's a real chunk of families where dads just are absent. Father absence affects about a third of kids in the US. I'm curious about how much of that is actually driven by dad's mental health problems that don't ever get recognized or treated. It's common for men when they have depression and anxiety to self-medicate. So you might see substance abuse. You might even see things like risky driving, gambling, behaviors that are self-destructive, but that to men might feel more comfortable in some ways than admitting there's a problem and asking to seek therapy. So there's a certain amount of masking that can happen. There's normal baby blues. Like I think a lot of new parents are struggling with sleep deprivation and just kind of questioning whether they have what it takes to be a good parent and worrying about maybe not wanting to repeat patterns from their own families of origin. So, I don't think we need to pathologize like every little bit of distress that we feel in the first year. I think it's normal for it to be hard and taxing, but I think when it's really impairing somebody's functioning and the quality of the relationship and their ability to show up as a parent, then it's time to think about intervention.
Yeah. And when you were talking too about substance use and things like gambling, I wonder too about excessive screen use. Something that I hear from moms, unfortunately, quite often is that their husbands become kind of withdrawn into like their phones, scrolling, video games, things like that. Is that their way of trying to escape, or is that maybe a sign of something deeper going on? Have you looked at any of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think it's really a marker of somebody who doesn't want to be present in a situation and maybe doesn't have self-regulation tools to modulate their emotions. And so they're kind of escaping into these digital distractions. And that's a new thing, right? We didn't used to have the ability to immerse ourselves into an entire world of amazing entertainment from the couch.
Right.
So I think it can be a very maladaptive coping strategy. And it's one that a lot of people are defensive about. So it's very difficult if that's something your partner is doing. I think it's helpful to be, again, like sometimes prenatal counseling and education are helpful even before the baby comes, just to anticipate problems and have a good dialogue about what might happen before it happens. But I think problematic screen use can absolutely be a sign of somebody who maybe doesn't have the tools to self-regulate on their own.
Right. And how, I guess, would you parse out or kind of distinguish between actual maladaptive or maybe depressive symptoms and more of that kind of just like checked out dad, like just the dad who doesn't really know what's going on, doesn't really care to know what's going on, just kind of thinks it's the mom's job or the woman's job, is just like uninterested and checked out versus someone who's maybe struggling with mental health?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a continuum there from because often being completely checked out and withdrawn is a sign of poor mental health. So,
Yeah.
you always want to look as a clinician at functional impairment. To what extent is it getting in the way of somebody's ability to show up to fulfill their social roles, whether that means the role of partner, the role of parent, the role of worker. And, it may be that it's a man who simply doesn't think that parenting is his job and he's going to take downtime when he can. And I think that warrants a conversation, but it's a different kind of conversation from someone who's really struggling and desperately seeking to cope. But I think in any case, it's something that, when there's a change from normal baseline and, like when people say, I'm not enjoying the activities that I used to enjoy, right? That's like a hallmark sign that there's a problem. So if there's a marked behavior change, then that's usually a cue that something is going awry.
Yeah. We are going to take one more quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about the relationship piece because I think that one is really, really huge. We'll be right back. Okay, so we were just talking with Darby Saxbe, author of Dad Brain, and we were chatting a little bit about like mental health challenges and things like that might come up postpartum for both dads and moms and how those impact each other. You talk a lot about stress too, which obviously having a baby is normally incredibly stressful unless you have one of these like perfect newborn angel unicorn babies.
Never met those.
Me either. They might exist. I don't know. But I think overall having a baby is stressful, right? It's physically exhausting. You're sleep deprived. Your whole life feels like it's been upended. And I think a lot of couples, and I'll generalize a little bit based on what I hear and see, I think a lot of men in particular really struggle with the changes in the relationship dynamic. They feel kind of cast aside. They feel like they're not, being prioritized. And I think a lot of women or birthing people feel resentful of that. They feel like, how dare you whine to me about your needs when we have this baby and like I'm giving everything I have to this baby, like you're just going to have to wait over there. How do we navigate all of this? Because I don't think either person is right or wrong in their feelings, but it can be really tricky.
Yes, it's a really common scenario, and we know that relationship satisfaction takes a dip around the birth of a baby. So there's a very reliable drop in relationship quality in new parents. And it makes sense because you're, like you said, exhausted, you're overwhelmed, you're dealing with these new roles. And I think for a lot of men, their primary emotional support person is their partner. That's who they confide in. That's who they have the most intimacy with. And so when they kind of feel like they're losing her to this other being whose needs are so much more acute than theirs, I think, and then, like we talked about men not always kind of knowing what their role is in the first few months or how to be helpful, they can feel a little lost and a little bit disconnected. And then, of course, for women, they're completely devoted to the new baby and don't really have the bandwidth to pay attention. I think it's helpful for couples to reframe this as a season in life that's temporary. A lot of the couples whose relationship satisfaction drops in new parenthood see a rebound. We see all these different trajectories. We see couples whose relationship quality ends up better than ever after they've survived early parenthood. We also see couples who decide to end their relationship. So it can go a lot of different ways. But if you know that the hardest part of parenthood is temporary, and your focus is on, let's just survive. We don't have to thrive from moment to moment. We're just going to get through this. And to try to do fun things and make sure, like as a family, do fun excursions, fun outings, like make sure that you don't put your whole life on hold. Sometimes one person gets really anxious or really rigid about certain rules for the baby or schedules, and then that can really prevent the ability to be spontaneous. I think it's good to try to find some middle ground, like especially if people have different styles for how they want to approach the baby's life. Like it's also good for each member of the couple to have other people that they can vent to. Like, make sure that you're investing in those outside relationships. When men are kind of adrift because they don't have their partner to turn to because she's distracted and preoccupied, it's helpful if they have other friends that they can try to see. It's helpful if they have hobbies, creative pursuits, playing sports, things that can kind of fill their cup so that they're not just waiting for their partner's attention. And moms need those things too. They also need outlets, and that's very hard to do with a new baby. But I'm also a huge believer in just bringing babies along. Like, it's good for them to, come along for the ride in everyday life. And I think sometimes we really partition babies and young kids into their own separate, very child-centered universe. And then we kind of have adult life, and those spheres have grown very, very separate. I think we did not evolve to live that way. We evolved to raise children in community and to get a lot of support. And that's another thing I would say for the pressure on couples is that we've kind of made the nuclear family the sole locus of child rearing when there used to be a lot more community and collective and kin support. So, there's one hunter-gatherer society I talk about in the book where dads are only holding the baby 7% of the time, but moms are only holding the baby 25% of the time. That's because the rest of the time you have grandparents, aunts and uncles, siblings, and peers. So everybody's getting a lot of support. We've got 2 people that are supposed to take care of an infant that requires 24/7 attention. And that's just a lot of pressure to put. So I would say, like, build networks, like, to whatever extent folks can create community and join forces with other parents, whether for play dates or just hanging out, holding babies, like finding ways to convene. I think a lot of those things can take that kind of isolated pressure off of the kind of nuclear family.
For sure. And I think, it's so hard to have just 2 people focused on the baby, but also most likely each working a job and trying to keep up with the household. And I think that all just perpetuates this relationship dissatisfaction if you feel like that division of labor isn't fair. I think, if mom is just taking over most of the baby care because of whatever reason, she's wanting to breastfeed, she's wanting to co-sleep, whatever, like she's just taking on that stuff for now. The dad needs to step up in all the other ways. Based on your research, what do you think is the most effective way to kind of split up the household labor?
So I am a fan. I know this is controversial, but I like E. Brodsky's Fair Play system.
Same, I do too.
Oh, good. Okay, we're on the same page. I consulted with her on the book when she was writing the book. We chatted because I had done division of labor research. And the thing that I like about that system, and I think you don't have to do full-fledged fair play to do this, it's just that to whatever extent anyone has a household task that they're responsible for, they have the whole task. They have the conception, they have the planning, and they have the execution. The idea of the kind of randomly assigned tasks like, oh, I'm making dinner, but we're out of onions, or please get milk, or this kid needs to go to this summer camp at this time. Like, it's hard to be delegating to another partner. It's better as much as possible for partners to own what they are doing.
Yeah.
So if your job is weekday breakfast, you don't just get up and make pancakes. You make sure that you have eggs and pancake mix in stock, right? Like that's your job, and you know what time you need to start it. You know what time everybody needs to leave for work or school. You don't have anybody reminding you. So I think it's not even about an exact 50-50 split. That doesn't always make sense for every couple. It might not be feasible. I think couples should be free to negotiate depending on what they enjoy doing and what everybody's workday looks like. But it's about whatever chunk of tasks you do all of them. And I think the other thing is taking things off your plate. Like, I think the more you can simplify your life and your routines and even outsource things, I think the less pressure you're putting on the 2 people to do everything that needs to happen with the household. I think we have this explosion of mental labor responsibilities on parents. Like, I just did this with my kids' summer camp. Like, download an app, go to a portal, get a QR code. You can't pick up your kid without the QR code.
It's so exhausting.
Do the medical forms. It's like so much mental tax on my time and paperwork tax. that I feel like we need to push back and come up with better systems. I think a lot of this is like, and we've been talking about it in terms of how do you solve it for the couple. A lot of this is a collective action problem.
Mhm.
It's like, how do we solve this at a societal level? How do we build better
Exactly.
infrastructures? How do we build better systems? So we're not actually forcing couples to kind of scramble to deal with this unsustainable load.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm always thinking about like what system is it that makes my kids' summer camps all start and end at different times and none of those times match up with each other or with school or with the workday schedule. Like why other countries have this figured out. Why is it
It's
like
because we're relying
such an
on
enigma?
yeah, we have like a privatized patchwork of for-profit services instead of a strong universal set of public options.
Yeah, gosh.
I mean, that's my hill to die on.
Same, 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 same. You also write on Substack. So if people want to check out your work, if they love your book, they should definitely follow you on Substack. You wrote one piece, and you've kind of mentioned this already, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into this idea that great parents are made, not born, or it was a video, I guess. But I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit more about that. And specific to dads, I think, again, we have this disadvantage where we don't have a lot of experience growing up with children, taking care of children. And so if it feels hard, we assume we're not good at it. So what do you have to say about dads, about what does it actually take to be a good dad?
Yeah, I think what it takes to be a good parent is really about quality of attention. It's about paying attention, it's about noticing, it's about observing, and it's about attuning to what a
Hmm.
kid needs. And we are in such a distractible environment that it can be hard to sustain that kind of attention. I don't think it's about watching kids every second of every day. I don't think it requires narrating what they're doing from moment to moment. A lot of it is about curating experiences that are a good fit for your kids and giving them the opportunity to develop autonomy and explore them on their own. So, I'm a big believer in fostering kids' independence and resilience. And I think what kids need also changes at different ages.
Hmm.
In the first year or two, they need close attunement and connection with a caregiver's physical body. In later childhood, they don't necessarily need somebody who's watching them at all times. They need some freedom and a chance to explore their own spaces and build their own peer relationships.
Mm,
But I think it comes back to that, just like how well can you read another person's signals? Another word for that is empathy. And that's really what the brain changes we see in parenthood overlap with. They overlap with what we call the mentalizing brain. It's the brain that helps us read other people's signals and interpret other people's minds. And I think not only is empathy really important for parenting, it's really important for being.
yeah. Yeah. And we're lacking it in our society right now, I think. So that is a really, really important thing to highlight. And while you were talking about that too, I love how you describe the difference of, early infancy where they really need that heavily attuned care and then balancing that with allowing them to take risks and be resilient and gain independence. This is something, and that basically just describes secure attachment, right? And
Yeah.
I think this is a huge misconception with a lot of dads that I see and that we work with, which is that if they give too much closeness, too much attention, if they respond to a baby every time they cry or, are holding them too much or letting them sleep in their bed or all of these different things in, we're talking early infancy here, that somehow they're going to prevent this independence from unfolding later. What would you tell a dad who was worried about that?
Yeah, I would say you can't spoil a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wild if you look at early 19th century parenting manuals, they say,
Tell me about it.
toughen up your boys, don't
Yep.
hold them, put them down as quickly as you can,
Yeah,
and
some of them say give them a handshake when you wake up in the morning and nothing else.
exactly. So
Literally.
I'm really glad that we've moved on from that
Yeah.
era of harsh parenting. I think we have a much better sense of what humans need. And a lot of that actually comes from animal research. So looking at, Harry Harlow with his monkeys, looking at what happens when monkeys don't get adequate care and attention, looking at just how much our biology attunes to people around us and how primed we are to receive care. I think, secure attachment is about the concept of providing a stable base. It's like we are the home base from which our kids are then free to roam and explore. And I think it often gets misconstrued as attachment means you're always attached to your child. Like there are attachment parents who won't send their child to school or hire a babysitter or, let them go over to a friend's house. I think that's not quite what attachment means. Attachment is really about a child having an internal sense of security so that they can go out into the world, try new things, take risks, and know that there's going to be a soft landing of a caregiver that they can rely on. But the idea of not wanting to pick up a baby too much in the first year or two, what I would say is a newborn baby doesn't understand the difference between their body and yours. Their biology is literally tuned to yours and is regulating to yours. Their heartbeat, their arousal, their temperature, all of that is synced, their gaze, and they're kind of learning how to be a person and develop a stress response system in conjunction with their caregiver. So once that early learning takes place, then you can foster a lot more freedom. But what you don't want to do is kind of deliberately neglect a baby in its very first year because you think that's going to somehow make them more tough and resilient.
Right. Yeah, it's the opposite. It sounds counterintuitive, but it really is true. Like the more security you can provide, the more secure that they will feel to go out and explore their world and be independent, self-sufficient adults.
Right. They can internalize that trust.
Exactly. Darby, this has been such a great conversation, and I know it's going to help so many moms and dads, and I hope everybody grabs a copy of Dad Brain. It's such a good one, and it's so, so needed, especially in today's parenting landscape. Last question for you. I think, I love to ask people what is something that you wish you knew before becoming a parent, and I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I have teenagers now, so what I'm thinking right now is I wish I had known how much harder the teenage years were going to be.
No, don't tell us that.
That's not what your listeners want to hear. You know what? They're both better and worse because it's really fun to see your kids develop their own personality and their own interests, but then they can also push back on you in ways that are just unprecedented.
I'm ready for it. I was not a good teenager to my parents, so I know I have it coming, but it's like a different type of hard, right? You can't, it's hard to compare.
Same. It's like so many things. Yeah. At least I get to sleep through the night most of the time. So that's a huge plus. But I would say more than you think. And you will feel totally helpless and confused, but you will learn. And what we have, we've talked a lot in this conversation about being innately wired and whether or not your brain knows what to do. And I always say it's not that your brain is built with this perfect parent inside it. It's more like we're built with brains that are adaptable and flexible and that are capable of learning. And when you put in the time and make the investment, you will build the brain that you need to be the kind of parent that you want to be.
I love that. The growth mindset. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. I lied before. Are there any other books that you have read and enjoyed lately that you would recommend, either fiction or nonfiction?
So many books. I love reading both fiction and nonfiction. I finally just read Lena Dunham's memoir, Famesick, which
I'm listening to it right now. I can't stop.
I really enjoyed it. And I had watched Girls when it first came out. And so it was so interesting to hear the behind the scenes. And then she went through such an intense health journey. So she's a really compelling writer. I liked that a lot. I read Yesteryear, which I thought was interesting. Of course, it's gotten a lot of hype. I wasn't totally sure if I bought into all the hype, but it was a great premise. And
Agreed. That was a very unpopular opinion I had, but I agree.
Really? And I also read Strangers, which I liked.
Loved,
yeah. She was very compelling, but I was also like, man, is she ever rich? So I was
it was hard to, I thought the same thing. Like it was beautifully written and I thought it was a really compelling story, but also I was like, yeah, but you're still rich at the end of the day. So.
Right. Like, I don't know that these problems are problems that I will ever have.
Right.
But she was still a great writer and I was impressed. I mean, I think it takes a really talented writer to make you root for somebody that does have all the privileges that she has. So
very good point.
Right.
Very good point. Yes.
Being so appealing and so real on the page. And I love reading mystery novels. I haven't read a great one lately that I can recommend, but I do love like a classic murder mystery like Locked Room, Agatha Christie.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, those are always good. All right. Well, thank you for those recommendations. I would agree with your takes on all of them, I think. So, yeah, the Lena Dunham one I'm excited to finish. I'm going to probably hop off and go listen to some more of it while I take a walk or something because I just can't stop. It's so good. All right. Well, thank you so much, Darby. This was such a great conversation. Where can people find you, buy your book, and read more of your work?
So the book is called Dad Brain, The New Science of Fatherhood and How It Shapes Men's Lives, and it's available everywhere in bookstores and online. And as you mentioned, my Substack is called Natal Gazing. It's just darbysaxbe.substack.com. And in anticipation of releasing a book, I've been trying to step up my social media so folks can also find me on Instagram.
All right, I'll link all of that in the show notes so it's super easy for people to find. I really appreciate you joining. Thank you so much for writing such an important book on such an important topic. We appreciate you.
Totally my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and for everything that you do.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.